as I start most of these episodes, to be honest, after the weekend, there isn't a whole ton of news. There's some auctions here and there. I think auctions end over the weekend, so that is kind of what I am going to talk about. And it really is a comparison of, I was looking at Card Ladder, some of their data, and I was looking at the cards that have sold for over $1 million, because I saw there was a Sandy Koufax jersey that sold right around $1 million, and it was surprising to me that I feel like we've seen, and it may just be a rise in news stories about iconic, famous jerseys selling for, in the millions. Like, there's obviously like the Jordan, the Jordan Finals jersey that sold for like $8 million, and then there was the Maradona Hand of God gold jersey that sold for, that was in the high seven figures, I believe, or six figures. Seven figures is over $1 million. Yeah, so it would have been, seven figures. That's what it was. So at this point last year, there had only been, sorry, I had the date up. There had only been two cards that sold for over $1 million. So there was a Babe Ruth card, and I'm talking January 1st until the beginning of May, basically. So there had only been, actually, wait, sorry, I'm looking at the date. I should have just said the 20th. Here we go. I don't think it's going to change much. $1 million cards are not selling as frequently as they used to. So, yeah, there was a Babe Ruth card, and then there was a 52 Mantle PSA 8 that sold for basically $1.09 million, so just over $1 million. And then there was a Roberto Clemente PSA 9 that sold for just under at $960. But those are pretty much it. And then if we compare those filters to this year as well, the numbers are very similar. There's been two items that Card Ladder is tracking three items that Card Ladder's tracking that have been over $1 million. The lowest being, it was a $2.3 million card. It was a 1952 Mantle PSA 8.5. That's the highest sports card that's sold this year so far. An 8.5 sold for $2.3 million. There was a Magic the Gathering CGC 10, which sold for $3 million. And then maybe some of you might remember I talked about this case selling probably back in, I guess it would have been March or April. It says the auction was in February, but I don't think it was that long ago that I was talking about this. I mean, time is kind of flying, but it was the 1979 O-Pee-Chee case that sold for $3.7 million. And if you just look at some of the high value cards or the cards that have sold for, because I'm just sorting it by price, it's kind of a lot of random stuff. There's like another Babe Ruth SGC that sold for $630,000. There looks like there's a postcard from something with Babe Ruth, and then there's another Mickey Mantle in here. There's a LeBron card, and then actually, pretty surprisingly, there's a Wembanyama card that sold for $516,000. But if you compare that to last year there was actually a lot more. It seemed like, I guess, mainstream would be one way I would put it. Like the Roberto Clemente, there's a LeBron James Topps Chrome, there's a Michael Jordan patch autograph, there's another LeBron James Exquisite, Tom Brady, and these are just some of the cards that have sold in that $500 to $1 million range from last year. And if you compare that to this year, the list looks a lot different. It's a lot more, I guess, seemingly, I mean, I don't want to necessarily call them random cards, but they're cards that are like, like I said, there is a Michael Jordan signed patch in here. There is an 86 Fleer, but then I'm starting to get into below 500,000. So the number of cards that sold for 500,000 is also higher last year compared to this year. And like looking at the list from last year and this year, I guess, in theory, there is a lot of vintage stuff. There's a lot of, well, not even vintage stuff. There's a lot of, I guess, I don't know. I don't mean to call it vintage, but it's like old 90s, 2000s cards. And I'm wondering, what are going to be the cards that are produced nowadays that are going to be viewed as that? Because it feels like National Treasures could be important, but also at the same time, the fact that they don't use the game-worn stuff in a lot of those like higher-end products, like the fact that they're using player-worn, which like realistically is just like they put on a bunch of jerseys and then that's player-worn, kind of feel like, I don't know, it cheapens the concept of the card, which I guess, you know, over time, maybe that'll be something that people don't remember as much, but I think, I'm just wondering if there's base cards too, because a lot of these cards, you know, the Mantle, I guess the LeBron Topps Chrome wasn't really a base card, but the Wembanyama, that's going to be 500, that's 500, but then that's actually, that's from April 18th, and that's the lowest in the $500,000 range. That was $516,000. So, you know, Wembanyama had a great year, Rookie of the Year, but I don't know, I'm sure there's a handful of Rookies of the Year who didn't pan out to be what they, didn't pan out to be the players that they really should have been. But the base cards, I mean, obviously the one-of-ones, I feel like those will probably be in these types of conversations, but like the base, just regular rookies, like we're never going to see like the way that like the Mantle PSA 10 or the 52 Mantle is like the base, is like a base card. And that card, you know, in a PSA 10, which I think the grading of that obviously changes things because there's only like 3 PSA 10s where nowadays, like, you know, I'm sure right now there's probably like thousands of PSA 10 Wembanyamas already that have been graded. So, and I'm not comparing Wembanyama to Mantle. I think I'm just making a comparison. There's just such a wide variety or a wide gap between how many vintage PSA 10s, and we talked about this, I think probably last week with grading, and actually maybe it was on Friday potentially. The PSA 10, I feel like, has been devalued pretty significantly. I think maybe also the card companies nowadays probably have something to do with that type of cheapening. I think that's how I described it earlier. With there being like thousands and thousands of different Wembanyama rookie cards as well. That's where I think that we as a sports card industry right now, I feel like we don't know what's going to be the card that everyone looks back at in 10, 15 years and says, this was the rookie card that you wanted to own. Because it reminds me a lot of the 90s where it was like, I was looking at Kobe rookie cards many years ago. And there was just like so many different options, but there were so many different companies that were making cards. Now it's basically one company making a bunch of different products. So it's almost the same concept, to be honest, of like, you could in a way you could consider like Prism or Optic or any of these brands as like different companies just making a card, because it does all fall under Panini or Topps, whichever one you're thinking of here. So I'm like, you know, and it felt like the Topps and the Topps Chrome ended up being like the Kobe rookies you should be looking for, but like with a player like Shaq, who was a rookie a few years before in 92, I believe, like his is like an upper deck that was like a redemption card that was like really hard to get and like had really hard centering and like the corners were chipping, and it were cards that were pretty hard to find in good condition if you weren't buying them already in good condition. So I don't think we're going to see something like that where the card's rarity becomes what ends up being like the go-to rookie, because if it's a random card, it could just be that nobody got it submitted, and maybe that's what ends up bringing more value to the graded cards. But in this day and age, and this is probably the last point that I have for this podcast, is like anytime there is an opportunity where somebody can make money within the industry, the opportunity really only lasts for a short period of time. So like hypothetically, let's just say 15 years down the road, or 10 years down the road, or 5 years down the road, I don't know, Wembanyama goes on to be a great player. and somebody finds out that there's this like random base product that nobody got graded, and for whatever reason it goes up, somebody sells it for $1,000 for a PSA 10. That card's going to get that specific card is going to just go up in grading. Like people are just gonna send in the cards to get graded. And maybe that's more of a mindset that we have now, and maybe in 5-10 years it's not necessarily, but the window there when somebody says, well, this card doesn't have a lot graded, it's like, well, that's not, it's true that's not graded, but it's because no one wanted the card anyways. But I think if you listen to people talk about 90s cards, that is sort of how a lot of random cards end up being popular from the 90s. Like inserts, I feel like that's obvious for this day and age. Inserts now and then inserts back then were just those feel like those are kind of no-brainers in terms of cards you could buy from back then and now, I think, too. But I just don't know what the card ends up being 5-10 years from now, because I think if we look back, yeah, sure, 2012, 2013, 2014, it was Prism because it was a new product. Maybe there's a new product that we're not seeing right now because it's new and we're so kind of stuck in our ways. So I don't know, maybe it's an opportunity for people to branch out and look into other products. Maybe this is your sign to go do that if you're listening to this podcast potentially. But either way, I mean, I think we'll see. It's going to take us a while probably to figure this out, but I think 5-10 years from now, the Prism card will still be popular. Actually, no, it won't be popular. I don't know what I'm saying, because Prism probably won't be made in 5 to 10 years potentially, unless Topps or Fanatics figure something out. But I just think that overall, we're not going to know what card ends up being the card until, and I don't even know what the indication will be, but we're not going to know for another 5 to 10 years, most likely. This past weekend, I went to the Fenway Card Show, put on by Chris from Card Vault, which I think is a really cool store. I know some people have gone in there and they have like this huge wall with all of these like pretty crazy cards, like pretty high-end cards that I think are really pretty interesting. It's in Gillette State, like or Patriots Place, which is, if you're not from the New England area, it's basically at Foxborough where the Patriots play. And Big Night Live, I think, put it on the original, which this was all Chris from Card Vault has been putting on a lot of these Boston shows, like in the city, like at all these really, cool places. Like the first one I remember was it must have been 2021, because I remember it was still sort of COVID times. I was wearing a mask for a majority of the first show that I remember going to, or the one that was at the TD Garden, like where the Bruins and Celtics play. Then the second one I remember was much more open. Like they had I think like Taco Fall was there, and he was wearing like a full matching velour suit. It was. I was like, oh my god, he was like the tallest guy that I've ever seen. It was insane. So at this year's show, which I think they've done it at Fenway in the past, so this is not the first Fenway show. Just the first Fenway show that I've been to, and it was packed. Like if you've been to Fenway, the concourse, it can get tight at times. But it was like as busy as like if there was a Red Sox game going on. Well, and that's obviously because people are just walking around the concourse, not going to their seats. But it was cool to have access to the seats and be able to sit in like the stands. I ended up doing it kind of touristy of me. I don't know if that's the word, but I did the tour as well. I hadn't done the Fenway tour in actually a while. I think I was a freshman in college. I did the Fenway tour, so that would have been, I don't know, 2011. So almost 15 years ago, which is pretty crazy to think. Like they've won 2 championships since the last time I did the tour, which they have like this whole inside area with cool, a lot of the like trophies and stuff. But the card show overall, something that I definitely have not seen over the past few months, and that has been good. I don't know, because I think I think it's good that content creators haven't been making this type of content recently, at least. It always goes through cycles, so maybe once the summer comes around and things slow down a little bit, that we'll start to see the sports cards are dead conversation again, because it was a clickbait title that I'm sure that I've used in the past, but it's something that I've tried not to engage with the conversation because it's just not like correct. Like it's just not true. and especially if you go to a show like this, and the National is coming up in Cleveland, and I know a lot of people don't really like Cleveland as much as Chicago. I mean, I've never been to the Cleveland National. I've only been to the one in Chicago. I think I've been to that one 3 times or twice. No, I think 2 or 3 times. I forget how many times I've been to that National, but I didn't go to the Atlantic City one. In 2020, the Atlantic City one was canceled, and then it was Chicago. So I think it was 3 times. So we're going to be going to Cleveland for this year's National. And I think really it's something where I'm wondering how many people in that place were new to sports cards. I mean, the fact that they can do these types of shows at the stadiums like this, which Fenway I think is much more accessible than like a lot of other stadiums in the country, in terms of like parking obviously is kind of a mess, to be honest. Like, I think I ended up paying like $40 for parking or something like that, but I was there for a while. But I was parked in one of the Boston garages, which I think Boston's notoriously known for having expensive parking. But if you just park anywhere in the city, or if you went on Sunday, I think street parking is free on Sunday. So if you didn't know that, a lot of the areas down in like Alston and like even I think in the Fenway area, I'm pretty sure, maybe not, probably not during games, maybe not, but like, I know in the Alston area on Sundays, you can park on the street anywhere you want for free, but you have to pay for the meter, which you can just keep. I think you can sign up for the app. So this would be an example of where if somebody wanted to park and they just wanted to go there for a couple hours, like they definitely could. And it was packed. Like I said, it was definitely a really cool show, and the weather was okay. Like it wasn't sunny, but it didn't rain, so that was good. So I don't think anything would have been affected if it had rained, probably other than just you couldn't go out like on the field maybe. But I think this is sort of where this is an example of what I think Fanatics is kind of trying to do. And maybe it's a little bit of a stretch here, but they're trying to add experiences within the sports card industry. Like they're trying to, somebody can experience sports cards, but they also get to go to Fenway Park, or they also, I'm not sure of any other examples off the top of my head, but this is, or I guess other than specific cards within products, you get your own Topps card, you get like the follow back, you get like I think they did the thing with the Wembanyama cards where they had like an event with the Wembanyama cards, but like I just think that that's really how you're going to grow the industry if you want to. Like if you're a company that is fine with kind of everything that you're doing, and you've been running your business for a while and you're not really looking to grow as much, like you're living kind of like a comfortable life with the business, if that's what you want to do, then maybe it's not. But I think that adding the experience of being able to go to Fenway and get to go to a card show, I think is the way that we really can expand the industry. Like if Topps does this where they drive around the van, but I really think that, and you do have to find a location too, that's kind of the other thing, but I think that if they were to expand this to other markets, like I think that could be I think that there could be a business involved in like touring card shows at like high-end locations. Like if and it would have to be, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to have like it'd have to be a regional company most likely, because you'd have to have all the marketing around it. You'd have to figure out like what market is going to be the best for the card show, which, like I said, I think Fenway was a really good market because the stadium is really it's easy to get to. I guess it's easy to get to if you know your way around the area for the most part. But it is like in an area where it's like hypothetically, if you're just walking around to that Fenway area, you could just run into the show and be like, oh, it's at Fenway. And tickets were pretty inexpensive. I mean, $25 to get to go to the show. I think it's probably a little bit more than, like a typical card show. But like I said, it's you're getting to go to Fenway, and all the vending booths were open, so you could go get your Fenway Franks, all these kinds of things. But I think overall, my takeaway from the show is that and also to my knowledge, I think this could just be that, like, maybe I don't know of these shows that are doing this, but, like, I feel like there could be a company, and this is what I said about the National, the company that, or I don't know, actually, the National, I don't know if they're technically the company or how, that puts on the National. I don't know exactly how the company structure works, but like the Dallas Card Show, if these companies worked together and they co-branded these shows as like something, I don't know how they would do it. I think that would be very interesting. I also understand at the same time that the owners of those shows want to make the money and they don't want to be splitting profits anyway. But I think that there could be a company that builds shows like this, and it you know, builds them, and, you know, and there's nothing against shows that are just like in conference rooms, like, or in conference areas in hotels. Like, those shows are also phenomenal as well. I mean, any show is going to be good. That's kind of my thoughts on it. But, like, if there was a company that, you know, had the budget to rent out some of these places, like if they were to do like a Staples Center, well, I guess it's not Staples Center anymore, it's the Crypto.com Arena or whatever, but like, I think, or Yankee Stadium, or I think you understand what I'm saying, but like big places around the country, I think it potentially would be places that people might travel to go to these shows. You know, I saw Ryan Card Collector 2 there. I saw like a bunch. I did see a few people that I knew. I think I saw like Santiago Cards. I saw the King of Collectibles. He was there as well. So I mean, there were people that traveled there for the show, not just to make content. Like, they were at the show buying and selling as well. So I think, like I said, my final takeaway is that I could see a company coming in and trying to build these card shows, but I do hope that they take into account just the industry in general and the people within the industry, because we have seen in the past companies try to come in and build something that weren't really doing sports cards or weren't really doing the type of thing within the industry that they were trying to do. And unfortunately, things did not go as well as they'd hoped, which, like I said, if they were to take a little bit extra time and try and gauge more interest and try and gauge more conversation from the community, I think that they would have a better chance of succeeding rather than just trying to go in thinking that they know what's going to be best for the show. So I wouldn't say it's a controversy. The big thing that I saw on social media today, or well, yesterday, was that there was a Jordan PSA 9 star, 1984 star, that sold in a private sale for $925,000. First of all, Victor put out a phenomenal article on the website at the beginning of May about this debate, because that's sort of what it was online today, was the debate between the 1986 Fleer and then this 1984 star rookie for Jordan. Which one is the rookie? Which one is the card you want to get? Funny enough, also, Mike from Junk Wax Hero, look, because Darren Ravel, they wrote an article about it on Collect or whatever, and yeah, in the article, they proclaimed that now the Jordan 1984 card is, you know, the card that everyone wants, when it's like, I don't know. And this is what's funny about it. And this is the Mike from Junk Wax Hero. He literally put out a tweet that took, 5 minutes of research for people to realize that, like, this card has been, the 1984 star Jordan has been outselling the 86 Fleer Jordan for quite some time, going all the way back to 2019. Now, I think the context is important here, because over the past year or so, PSA has started regrading this card, because for a while, there just weren't that many PSA 9s. Like, in 2019, there was in 2022, there was a PSA 9 that sold for $444,000, which, you know, the PSA 10 Jordans had their moment where they were in that close to the million range, which I still think that this is I don't know. The word undervalued, I don't think is the right card, because I think that has like almost a negative connotation nowadays, if I'm going to be completely honest. Like, there are certain words that I feel like were just overused in like the boom era of COVID, of when everybody was making content about like, what's the next card to buy? What's the good card to buy? What's the next one? What's the next one? Undervalued was used. And I don't know. I think I've been on record saying that card, or using the word undervalued, basically means like, or basically people were using the card, they were using the word undervalued in the sense that they were just trying to sell their card, basically, for the most part. Like, that's what I found, at least, when I saw people using that word and using it in the context of, like, they were talking about a card, which, I don't know. I think you can still use it. I don't know. I'm not gonna sit here and say don't use certain words or whatever. But I think undervalued it was just overused, in my opinion. And I think it was overused with the context that, like, it was being used on, like, I remember people talking about, like, 2019, I think, is a good year. Like, people were talking about, like, Tyler Harrow or, like, Kobe White, and they were saying that those players were undervalued, and it was just, like, everybody had the next undervalued card, or everybody knew the next undervalued player. But that's kind of not besides the point. This 1984 star rookie was not graded by PSA or Beckett for, decades, because there was so many counterfeit cards that were coming through. Both companies were just like, we're not going to grade this card anymore. And even I remember the same guy that bought the 1952 PSA 9 mantle, he also bought one of these PSA 9 Fleer or PSA 9 Star rookies and tried to get it regraded by PSA. And at the time, because I interviewed him, and it was either on my interview or it was on a different interview, because when he bought the 52 mantle, he was interviewing with a lot of different people. And one of the things he said, like I said, I don't remember where it was, but he was saying that he tried to get the card regraded, and PSA wouldn't even regrade the card. They wouldn't even put the card in a new slab. Like, it wasn't that they wouldn't regrade it, it's that they wouldn't put it in a different slab with a new holder, because it had one of the old PSA holders, which is, fine for a card that was graded back then. But because of the counterfeiting and because there were so many counterfeits of the card, PSA wouldn't even hold the card. I don't think that's recase it, because of that fact. And I would still be pretty wary of any star rookies you're buying that are not newly graded, if I'm going to be honest. Like, if you're going to look for that card, I would try and find PSA certification numbers that were produced in the past couple years. If that's just my opinion. But it's interesting within the hobby that when the hobby just agrees that something is what it is, because this was confusing to me when I was first getting back into cards and I was first learning about, Jordan rookies and all of these things. I kept seeing people talk about this star rookie. And 1984 was before, obviously, 1986, which is, 86 is the Fleer Jordan card that everyone tells you is the card that you want to buy. But when I was looking into it, I kept seeing this in 84 star, and there was no really articles about what was going on until I found, like, one. It was like a blowout forum, potentially. Like, it wasn't even an article, really. It was like a blowout forum art. It was someone put in the blog that, like, there was issues with counterfeiting, and that's why it was so hard to find. And that's why people didn't want to claim that card as, like, the Jordan card that you would want to buy. But it is a thing where it's like, it is an earlier card. Sure, it wasn't licensed technically, because these star packs essentially were produced as, like, team packs. So it was kind of like the team sets that Topps has. But from my understanding of it is that they weren't licensed. Like, the NBA didn't license the company to make the product, or it was either that or that the licensing like that didn't exist back then. So it's not that it wasn't licensed. It's just that it didn't, that type of thing wasn't going on back then in the first place. So you didn't need it. I guess it's one of the two. Like I said, I'm going to be honest, I forget exactly which one it was. But essentially the hobby has just decided that this is, the Fleer is the card that you want to buy. And I think the market, like I've always said, the market is the market. The market will determine which cards are going to be more valuable, not what people are saying. It's what the market is saying. So the fact that these PSA 9s, like this PSA 9 sold for almost $1 million, becoming the most expensive Jordan rookie, or, Jordan. I think there have been other Jordan autograph cards that have sold. Like, I know there was one that I think Golden has. It's like a one-of-one. It was like the first one-of-one Jordan rookie. I'm pretty sure. I forget if that sold or if it was going to sell. But regardless, it's something interesting that I feel like our industry, I don't know if it's good or bad necessarily, because, like I said, the market has determined that this Fleer card is the one that you want to buy. There's just more of them. And I think PSA not grading it, I think that probably also had an effect on it. And I just think that there's never going to be a definitive answer. And that's kind of the other interesting thing about this card and the concepts and everything, is that, like, there's never going to be, like, a definitive, like, yes or no to one of the other cards. And I think that's just something that happens within this industry that, I think it's good and bad, because, one thing that I think is good for the industry is data and analytics and definitive information, which is, like, one of the reasons why I really am a big fan of the Topps Now cards, because we know that it is the first card that was released of whichever player, and we know what the print run is. So it's like, when I look at that type of information, I'm interested in that, because, like I said, it's just, we have the information, we know this stuff, so it gives, in my opinion, it gives the concept and product more legitimacy, where, with some of the other cards, whether it's the Topps flagship or something along those lines, we don't really know how many of those cards there are. We have people that do some of the data, they do some of the mathematics, and they show how many are potentially there, but not how many are. And it's kind of like that with these cards in a way, where we for so long knew that the Fleer also had counterfeiting issues, but not I don't think as bad as the Star. We knew that how many of them really existed because of how many were graded, where the Star, we didn't really know that information. So maybe that was one of the reasons why people, wanted the Fleer versus the Star. And like I said, go check out Victor's article. I think he did a great job breaking down the two cards. And I don't know, go check out Ravel's website or two. I'm obviously going to tell you to come to our website to look at this information, because I don't know. I think we are. It's not technically breaking news, but it's like we discuss the topic that is the breaking news of this, what's going on. So come to our site, look at the article Victor put out to get more information on the topic, because I think as we get more information, that's what's going to help. More information is going to help the hobby. I just think that is 100% a fact. I just think that the more that people understand about a certain topic, the better and more healthy it is for the market, for the hobby. So for this one, we're going to get more PSA graded cards, because they said they're going to start grading the card again. And it's going to be interesting to see how many, I don't think they put out this data yet of how many counterfeits there are, but with them grading it more often now, we're going to start to see maybe even a fluctuation in the amount of cards that there are. So I don't know. And I think sometimes when we run into cards like this, when it's like the unknown of the card is what I think is what's selling it. So I would get nervous telling you to go out and buy something like this, because it's like, especially with the influx in grading. And I don't remember if I talked about this on a previous episode. I think I remember the concept talking about it, where when one thing becomes popular, I think I was talking about rookie cards and which one's going to be popular. And if a card sells for a certain amount, people are going to try and get that card graded, and that's going to increase the population, which then will decrease the price. And it's a very strange concept that happens within this industry, but it's just it is what it is. So if you want to learn more, come check out the website, because Victor put out an article about it. But as of right now, we have one of the PSA 9s of a Star rookie that now is the record for one of the highest graded, or one of the highest sold Jordan cards of all time. We got some exclusive news in the past couple days from Heritage Auctions. They're going to be, they came to us first. Danny posted this. He posted a video actually with Chris Ivy, who is from Heritage Auctions, where they're going to talk about, or in the video, basically, they talk about the backstory behind two of the jerseys that they're going to be selling. And I don't, there are so many like iconic moments, I feel like, in sports, but like potentially we're going to see one of the most iconic. Like, I would say if there's a Mount Rushmore, no, probably like a top 10. I mean, I'm sure there's, I don't know, making a top 10 list is probably pretty hard because it's going to be different for everybody. But I would say if you're talking most iconic, the Babe Ruth game where he called his shot, if you do that with the bat, every sports fan is going to know the exact reference that you're talking about. So this is going to, I mean, I don't know what it ends up selling for, but we have seen some really insane jerseys. And I talked about this, I think, earlier on this week about some of the different crazy jersey sales that we've seen. The other one is actually a game, is from a 1952 Mantle jersey from Game 7 of the World Series. I mean, another, if you're a sports card person, that 52 Mantle that year is like probably the most important year for baseball cards. I would say, I would say it's, one of, if not probably the most important year when it comes to baseball cards because of the 52 Mantle. You got the 52 Mantle, you got the 52 Jackie Robinson in that set. Both are like pretty, probably, again, these lists are all subjective. So like a top 5 card, probably the Mickey Mantle 52 Mantle, I would say. So you have these two jerseys that are going to be selling. I mean, I don't necessarily know let's just say the valuations on jerseys, if I'm going to be honest. Like, I just see them rolling in, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's, the Jordan's final jersey, the Hand of God Maradona jersey. I know there was a Kobe jersey. I think it might have been his rookie debut jersey, or there was some other Kobe jersey that sold. But I wouldn't be surprised if this Babe Ruth jersey breaks a record. And I know I've said that I hate when people say that, because usually most of the time it's not a genuine thought. When you see those random articles, and again, it was the Babe Ruth card that you saw like the Washington Post and people writing articles about. I wouldn't be surprised if this jersey ends up having a similar marketing campaign behind it, if I'm going to be honest, because it is so iconic that it's like I said, if you do the thing with the baseball bat or you point, everybody knows exactly what you're doing if you're a sports fan. And I would say even a lot of people that aren't sports fans probably understand the reference. So the fact that you could buy the jersey where he did that thing, it really is insane. And the thing that I've been thinking about with jerseys and memorabilia is like, it kind of has to, so it has to do with market cap. Market cap is what I think I've been thinking about. And like, how much money is invested in sports cards versus how much money is invested in jerseys? And could we see a shift in either direction anytime soon? I think that jerseys, there are so many iconic moments within a specific year. That's why I think jerseys almost have, I don't know. Maybe it's not underrated because they are, there are jerseys that are selling for millions of dollars. So it's not like you can't say that memorabilia and getting game used jerseys are underrated, because they're definitely not. But the fact that, for a while we were seeing sports cards sell in the high figures that we're seeing a lot of jerseys sell for now, I'm wondering if people are shifting. Like, if you're a sports collector, like let's say you're not just into sports cards, or you're into sports collecting, memorabilia, cards, everything. Where would you want to spend that if you have $1 million? Let's just say hypothetically, and I know that's sort of a wild number, and a lot of us probably don't just have $1 million to spend on a jersey. I understand that, but I'm just saying, in this hypothetical, if you could buy either a sports card for $1 million or some sort of jersey, I mean, personally, I would probably be buying the jersey. I mean, you could say, and I'm talking about you have to buy one or the other. Because if you bought $1 million worth of wax, I'm sure that would probably be a lot more fun than just buying a jersey. But if you have to buy a card or a jersey, I think I would be buying the jersey, because it also is it's also like a deck, like that's something where you can really put that up in your house. And this is one of the things I think with sports cards that they somehow, I don't think they'll ever be able to really do this. I don't know how, but I don't think they ever will. But the decoration with jerseys just cannot be replicated with cards, unfortunately. Like you can have cards on display at your house, like in a big thing, but then each of them you'd have to explain. I don't really know, and I think it's more if you go, this is the jersey from whatever game. I'm sure people are going to be able to understand that, rather than like, this is no, there's 99 of these cards, like hypothetically we're saying an exquisite or like national treasures or something like that. But like explaining, having a card that you spent $1 million on is probably a lot less confusing too to somebody who maybe isn't in the industry or doesn't collect or anything. Like, to say that, I mean, if you're a rich person too, like if you have $1 million to spend on a jersey, you're probably a rich person. So I mean, even still, let's just say maybe it's 10,000. I would even say the 10,000 would probably be, a jersey would be more worth that than spending that on a card, like an individual card. And that's also to say, like, I've never spent $10,000 on a card or a jersey, so maybe my opinion isn't necessarily correct. And as somebody who's in sports cards, maybe it could even be a little bit surprising, to be honest, that I would rather buy a jersey. But at the same time, like, I haven't necessarily asked other people, so like this may just be one of those opinions that I have, that everyone just goes, yeah, no duh, dude. Like, obviously you'd rather have the jersey than you would rather have a card. I'm sure there's some people who would rather have the card. Now, like I said, if you're spending $10,000 on sports cards or $1 million or whatever, the wax and the buying boxes is probably what you want to do to have more fun. Then, the jersey is on display, but it's the same as trying to display a card. Like, there isn't really a secondary aspect of it. I mean, unless you're like a psychopath and you like decide to wear the jersey, which I almost feel like if you're buying a jersey for that type of price, you almost have to, I feel like you have to sign some sort of agreement that you're not going to take this out of the case. Like, you're going to leave it as is, but it is your jersey. So it's like, if you buy it, they can't really necessarily stop you from taking it out of the holder or whatever the jersey is in. But I don't know. I mean, maybe wearing it to like a beer league softball game would be kind of insane, obviously. And also, now that I'm thinking about it, if you're buying a jersey for that price, you may not be necessarily into softball like that, or you may not be into the extracurriculars with stuff along like that. But yeah, two of these, I mean, like I said, I think they're probably two of the more iconic jerseys that we've ever seen, and I would say they definitely sell, just based on the fact that we've seen a bunch of cards. Like, we saw the Sandy Koufax card. There was a Sandy Koufax jersey that recently sold for $1.6 million, I believe it was. So these, I think they're going to be in the $1 million to $10 million range. Like, I don't know where they fall. I would say the Babe Ruth jersey could even get above 10, but at the same time, like, it's the type of thing where it's like, I don't really have the gauge on where some of the prices are. So, like, the mantle probably, I'd probably say it's in the $1 million. I would guess over $1 million, but I don't know if it's going to go much higher than that, in the $2-3 million. But this Babe Ruth jersey is probably one of the more iconic moments in sports history. It's like if you were to buy some sort of memorabilia piece from, like, the Muhammad Ali fight where he, like, stood over the guy and did the, like, fist bump or the fist pound, and was like super, like, that, well, the Rumble in the Jungle, I believe that's what it was. It's like if you were to buy some piece of memorabilia from that moment, like, everybody knows. And I would actually even maybe say the Babe Ruth might be more iconic because it has a thing. If you do the thing, if you point, people know what you're talking about. So this card could, I keep saying card. This jersey, I think will sell above 1 million. Now, does it sell above 10 million? I would say potentially, but I think we are going to see where the market goes potentially with this jersey, because it could be, I don't know, a catalyst for other pieces of memorabilia, because I think that's sort of what happened within sports cards, where a bunch of different cards sold for like a high number, and people were like, wait a second, I'm going to get into cards. So maybe this could be something where more people are going to get into memorabilia and jerseys because of what some of these high prices for these certain jerseys are going to eventually sell for soon. I don't know if I've gone on record saying that I think the off-season of sports are more entertaining than the actual seasons, because in ways it feels like the seasons and how they play are very predictable, but and honestly it could be a big change that we've seen over the past few years with like the NBA and NFL. Really, the NFL, I think, has done something very interesting with their offseason, because they're the only sport that's in the offseason right now. So, I don't know, maybe that has something to do with it as well. It's like NBA and NBA goes into the NFL still being offseason. So, and then maybe it's a cycle. So then you have the NBA offseason that ends up starting. But I think what the NFL I think has done has shown that they know how to space out all of their things. But it is also interesting that they have made a lot of the off-season things that they, normally maybe weren't things that people were interested in. They, the lead up to the draft, free agency, all of these things that the NFL have done. I think that they have made these things into into like must-see TV, basically. And all that being said, this is something interesting, that over the past 7 days, although this sport is in their off-season, the NFL had 3 players in the top 10 of total graded cards. So starting at number 10 was Bryce Young, quarterback for the Panthers. One of the players that doesn't have any autographs in any Panini products this year. Really kind of unfortunate, I think, to, Fanatics that didn't really do that much with Bryce Young. They did with CJ Stroud. They came out with a lot more CJ Stroud cards with rookies, but I guess it will be kind of unfortunate, and I don't even know like what these prices will end up being later on in Bryce Young's career. I mean, the Panthers also are really bad still, so it's like they're not even really improving. So I don't know. Bryce Young's still one of the players that was great a lot this week. Then we have 2 Lakers. We've got LeBron James and Kobe Bryant. Similar Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan is still also on this list. I'll talk about him a little bit later. But they're still, it's interesting how many cards of both of those players that, it looks like they still are being graded. Like, there's still so many cards that are of those 2 retired players that really don't have any cards nowadays that are still, people just haven't gotten them graded. Same with LeBron. I mean, I think maybe his is a little bit different because he still has cards that are coming out, but like Kobe, Jordan obviously don't. Then you have Connor Bedard at number 7. Not super surprising, only hockey player on this list. With his Series 2 rookie coming out, that's probably why we saw him make this list. And then number 6 is Caitlin Clark, which I don't know if there's any way to check this or know this, but I would be interested to know if potentially she is one of the only players that has cracked the top 10 of this list. And I know the media, and even probably on this podcast, I've talked about Caitlin Clark ad nauseum, and I understand the media. I've seen a little bit of a shift. It's kind of interesting with her. Like, they were really riding with her pretty heavy when she was in college, and now that she's made the WNBA, it's like it seems like the media narrative is sort of turning on her. I don't know. Maybe that could just be mainstream, and it's like, mainstream stuff is never really what the narrative, I think, is. But Caitlin Clark at number 6 on this list, above LeBron James. That's one thing. That's an interesting, little piece of this list. Obviously, with the start of the WNBA season, that could be a reason, but I don't know. I don't think with her, I think it might be a little bit different. And then number 5, another football player, Anthony Richardson. I don't know, not much to say about him. I think people are pretty excited. I think he had a really unfortunate injury at the end of last year, so people are going into this season and they're saying, well, you know, he could have been a top 5 quarterback last year if he hadn't gotten hurt. You know, I bet you could probably say that about a ton of different players that play well early in the season and they unfortunately get hurt like he did. Then Shohei Ohtani at number 4, Michael Jordan at number 3, then the CJ Stroud at number 2, and then double number 2, or basically almost double. I think CJ Stroud had 6.4 thousand cards graded, and Wembanyama had 11,000 cards graded. We're kind of in peak basketball cards coming out right now. Same with football, actually, too. Like, we're definitely maybe seeing more of the releases, so that could be another reason why the NFL is, you know, makes such a significant so it makes up a significant portion of that list, you know, along with the basketball players. But it's like, you know, and obviously I think there's going to be always more modern. I think when we look overall at grading numbers, I think we're always going to see modern have just a bit of a higher percentage of cards graded because there just are more cards, you know, and we're always also looking at some of those stars that are rookies in the league now and getting some of their first rookie cards. People are always more excited for them than they are, you know, whoever was in the draft last year, which is why you always see those rookies from this year making the, you know, topping those charts, which I would say this year we definitely had a pretty good rookie class in terms of just overall rookies. Like, football had a great rookie class. Basketball with Wembanyama, and I mean, I guess Chet Holmgren is in that conversation for rookie, but Wembanyama, and then Bedard, also phenomenal. Baseball, it's still, you know, it's still to be seen, I think, whether the rookie class within baseball is going to be really significant. With baseball, there's many more players, too, so it's like, again, with the NBA, there's just not as many players in the league, so they're going to have more cards produced of the top players in the league. I get, you know, that might be an interesting conversation as well. Like, if you were to look at the top, let's just say, I don't know, top 10 or top 20 players in the NBA versus the top 20 players in MLB, which would be like which players get more cards within releases throughout the year? That's something I'd be interested in because it's also, you know, rookies, I think, too. There's just going to be more rookies within baseball. Like, you know, the top Series 1, Series 2, and Update, obviously, they all have new rookies that are in there for the first time. Well, mostly Series 1 and Series 2. Update, not as much because basically, if for the most part, anybody who would make their debut in Topps Update, they would probably just hold them out until next year, you know, and that deadline's also coming up. So, you know, it could be the reason why, you know, a player like Shohei Ohtani, who is in a different era when it comes to rookies compared to, you know, I guess like Mike Trout, because there's just way more cards, and we've only seen the production and the amount of his cards specifically go up because of, you know, just he's going to be in every single set. I think similarly to a lot of the top stars in other sports, they're going to be in every insert set. They're going to be in multiple different, you know, short printed sets. So, you know, the data from these leagues, I think, is good to keep an eye on. I mean, if you are somebody who is, here's where I think the data is really important, this type of stuff, is for people who are going to shows and maybe even dealers too, because you want to be able to know who are the players that, you know, these are statistics that people, they're not necessarily sales numbers, but it's a different type of statistic that, it's a different type of statistic that may indicate which players are the most popular. Obviously, Wembanyama, and there's a bunch of different factors here, but if you are, you know, looking into this and trying to, you know, maybe make a living or trying to, like, step up your game, this is the type of information I think that's important to keep an eye on, just to know, like, which players got the most graded. in theory, I think that then would kind of translate to sales. I think you could probably take this list and say, well, if we buy X amount of cards within this list of different players, they're probably going to be decent buys if you're trying to flip them quickly. These are not, most of the time, these aren't types of lists where you're going to see long-term buys, like maybe Jordan, LeBron, but even them at this point, like I don't know if you really can look at the long-term when it comes to sports card values. I think if you're looking at these types of numbers, look at them for short-term buys. The long-term buys, I don't necessarily know if there's as much upside doing that type of research as there is if you were trying to sell the cards within the next, I don't know, like let's say 6 months, basically.